thank you all for what you do, because Amnesty International is one of the most important organizations in the world. I actually have been with the ACLU for 20 years. I've been a member of Amnesty International for far longer than that. So give yourselves a round of applause. All right, I was asked to talk about some human rights issues here in Pennsylvania, and I got to tell you, it was really hard to pick. Really hard to decide, because you could talk about our entire criminal justice system. From the police, we just filed a class action against the Philadelphia Police Department for racial profiling, to the abysmal state of indigent defense, which really does not put up a fight for people who are charged with crimes or juveniles who are charged with delinquent acts, to our prison system. Somebody just told me that Pennsylvania now has the largest per capita prison population in the country. I can tell you that we have the largest juvenile lifer population in the country, well over 400 juveniles here, and we have a huge population of prisoners who are on long-term restrictive segregation, basically in isolation where they just deteriorate and kind of have no hope of coming back. But I decided that you all probably know about that, and if not, there's plenty you can find out on the internet. So what I thought I would talk about is some things that may not be quite as obvious. One is the criminalization of dissent. And when I mentioned that at dinner, people are looking at me, huh, in this country? So I said, yes, I picked the right topic. And the other thing I just want to say a few words about is immigration, because I think that is going to be a huge issue. It is now, and it's going to continue to be a huge issue for years to come. So first, dissent. Go back to 2000 is the first time during the Bush-Cheney campaign that we saw protesters put into something called protest zones, right? And this was a great little trick. So if you supported the president, then you could get right up there and be adoring and wave your hands and have your Go George signs. And if you were protesting, you had to go into a protest zone, which kept getting moved further and further back. And by the middle of 2001, it was out of sight, out of mind, just you could treat them differently. Very, very unconstitutional, but this is going on. Then we had September 11th, and it changed things dramatically. After that, of course, you know, if you were Muslim, you kind of lost your rights for a few years there. Many were locked up. Anybody who dared say anything against the government was immediately questioned by the FBI. But you also had what is perhaps the most significant change in the last quarter century in law enforcement in terms of dealing with dissent. In 1976, in the wake of the revelations about the J. Edgar Hoover abuses at the FBI, you had a church commission, and you had all sorts of restrictions put on who can spy on and investigate protesters and dissidents. And under those regulations, you could not simply put somebody under surveillance, investigate them because of what they said or because of what they believed or because of what group they belonged in. You had to actually have reasonable suspicion that they have committed or were about to commit a crime. And Attorney General John Ashcroft, after September 11th, completely wiped that out. And the ACLU and other groups were out there sounding the alarm that this is going to lead to the FBI and law enforcement groups spying on peaceful activists, anybody who's criticizing what the government is doing. And sure enough, there were some high-profile incidents. You had the peace activists in Fresno. You had a lot of folks, including Amnesty International, folks in Denver. You had problems in Maryland. In September of this year, the Inspector General's office at the Department of Justice issued a report which documents how, in fact, the FBI spied on a group here in Pittsburgh called the Thomas Merton Center. This is a peace and justice organization that's been around for 30 years. Anybody who lives in Pittsburgh will tell you this is not a dangerous group. This is not Al-Qaeda. And what we found out in this Inspector General's report is that, in fact, the FBI wasted resources in order to put their members under surveillance. And there's another protest group in Pittsburgh, Pittsburgh Organizing Group. They actually infiltrated that group with an informant to find out what was going on. And then they got caught They got caught by the FBI and the Merton Center. We filed a Freedom of Information Act request. You know what they did? They lied to make themselves look good. This is all in the report. And you know how they lied? They said, oh, no, 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 no. We were actually investigating a suspected Middle Eastern Muslim terrorist. Right? So if you throw that out, of course, all right, well, you can do anything if you're talking about Muslim terrorists. Problem is, what the Inspector General found is, it wasn't true. And that led to actually FBI Director Bob Mueller going to Congress and lying. He didn't do it intentionally. He was repeating the lies that the Pittsburgh FBI had told him to try to cover up for them actually putting political activists, people who were criticizing the war in Iraq, under surveillance. At the same time, what we've seen in the last decade is a lot of these national security events involving political conventions, G20, G7, G8, whatever we're up to now, conferences, free trade conferences, and what happens at these events now is really startling. I've been doing this for a quarter of a century, and in 2009, the G20 came to Pittsburgh, and we got to witness it firsthand. And what we saw is equivalent to what you have under martial law. People who wanted to peacefully go out and express their views in opposition to the G20 and the policies of the G20 were denied permits, they were raided, they were harassed, they had their vehicles impounded, they had their literature and their equipment stolen, and on the last couple of nights, they actually arrested and detained anybody that they thought was a protester. It wasn't just the protesters. If you were in the vicinity and you were young, and this happened to be in a college area in Oakland where there are thousands of young people, college, they were all arrested just indiscriminately. And this is a pattern that we are seeing across the country at all of these events. And it's gotten to the point that we started out with protest zones, right, where you can move them. And now it's okay to actually criminalize the people who want to come out and protest. And what we had most recently here in Pennsylvania is a revelation over the last 6 weeks that the Pennsylvania government has partnered with a private group, the Institute for Terrorism Research and Response, in order to monitor dissidents and critics. By and large, people on the left, mostly people who are critical of the natural gas drilling that's going on. And this private group is not only working for the state of Pennsylvania, it's also their private clients are the natural gas industry. And all of this information that this group in the state of Pennsylvania is gathering goes not only to law enforcement, it goes to the natural gas industry. And there are hundreds of activists listed in these bulletins that they send out that they label as potential terrorists. And what it is people who hold vigils, who hold rallies, who hold protests. I swear, I think they just did a Google search, Pennsylvania rally, vigil, protest. Anybody who's in there is listed in these bulletins, and these are sent out far and wide on pieces of paper that say these people are potentially dangerous. So you start with going after dissent, you end up neutralizing dissenters. And while we're not throwing people in jail yet by and large, for their political views, it is becoming more and more fashionable, and especially at these national security events, it seems to be widely accepted that it's okay to do that, to imprison people, to prevent them from speaking just because they have a contrary viewpoint.